Hi, friends. It's Cameron, and welcome back to the Let's Get Candid podcast. How is everybody doing today? Happy Thursday. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whatever day or time it is that you're listening. So happy to be back on the mic with you guys. How is everybody doing? Happy mid-May. I hope you guys all had a beautiful Mother's Day if you were celebrating, or if it's a harder time for you with Mother's and Father's Day, I'm sending you lots of love. I feel like I keep seeing a lot of posts about how difficult this time of year is because of those two made up holidays. And I think it's beautiful that we take a moment to acknowledge those particular people in our lives, but there is also a moment to acknowledge that it takes a village to raise a child, that there's a whole lot more that goes into raising a child than one person or two people. And I hope that we get to acknowledge everybody who became a part of raising us and helping us grow into who we are today. I feel like I've been really trying to be more intentional about that, and just because I get to live at home, spend more time with my family, but especially spend more time with my cousins and my aunt and my grandparents, because as I'm getting older, I'm going to one day not live so close to them and have my own life. And I won't be able to spend as much time with them as I do right now. So while I'm in close proximity, why not do so? And yeah, I just wanted to share that note really fast. But I'm so excited for the next couple of episodes. I have some really exciting guests for you guys. I feel like ever since the hormone health one a couple of weeks ago with Lauren Papinos, I've just been on a roll with incredible guests. And I don't want to take too much of your time because I know last week's intro was long, and I feel like this week and the next couple episodes are going to be longer. So I need to keep my intros to a minimum. But I just wanted to say quickly as well, so many people lately have just been reaching out to me saying, I'm so grateful that you talk about these things, or thank you for sharing this, or you're so consistent, you're so confident, you're so inspiring. I love everything you talk about. I love everything you do. And it just doesn't go unnoticed. Thank you, thank you, thank you so, so much. I am really feeling called to be sharing more intimate details of the inner workings of my life and my business and the background of things. And that's exactly what we're talking about on this week's episode. So I will tell you guys a little bit more about it in a second, but I just wanted to take a note and say thank you guys for everyone who's been here throughout the last 3 years almost and helping me grow to who I am today. I wouldn't be who I am if it wasn't for the podcast, and I wouldn't have the businesses that I do without it either. And I owe it all to picking up a mic one day and just sharing my life on the internet, sharing my life on a blog. And I'm building my website. I actually had a call today to go over my branding guideline with Brandika Studio. I'll link her below. She's absolutely incredible. She's doing my website, and we just had the best time. We just hit it off so well. And as a trademark attorney, having a really good branding and website developer specialist in your back pocket is essential, because I can refer my clients to her as well. She can refer clients to me when she does their branding. And having her set up my law firm's website is super exciting. And then my branding across all my platforms is going to be a lot more consistent. We're getting colors, fonts, logos, all of that fun stuff. I cannot wait. And I'm also launching a consulting company for prospective and current law students and bar exam takers, as well as lawyers and professionals wanting to use social media and how to build personal brands. So I'm really working on building that as well. We're working on the website for that. And my assistants have been an integral part of that. So shout out to Socially Ambitious. I will link that episode below as well and their information for you. But I just wanted to shout out a couple of people who are making my life so much easier and so much more fun. And I'm actually talking about sharing more intimate details of my personal life. I am back in the dating game, and we're talking about dating in this episode. And next weekend, I have a couple of friends coming into town. We're doing my branding photo shoot, similar to the one I did last year with a friend from college. And we're revamping my branding, all of it, since I'm taking the time and investing in my website. I thought I would do a new branding photo shoot. And we're going to have a great college reunion weekend. And someone that possibly is coming down is someone that my friends have been trying to set me up with for a while. So that's exciting. And it feels good to be back in the dating game. I'm not ready to share totally what happened and what went wrong. And I don't think I ever really will. But I do dive into it a little bit more in this episode with Allie Jackson, the host of the Finding Mr. Height podcast. And by the way, I love that name. We talk all about it and how she got into being a dating expert and sharing her life and dating advice and helping daters, throw away the dating rules and find what works for them and adjust their mindset in dating, which is something that in the last, especially 3 years, but especially in the last year has changed significantly for me. And especially since I've been single recently in the last few months, my approach to dating has completely changed and I'm taking it slow. I'm really enjoying meeting people in the wild or mutual friends instead of dating apps right now. But it just feels really good to really work on discovering who I am and working on slowing down and enjoying where I'm at, enjoying the life that I've built, the life that I've created, all of the work that I've done on myself, and not trying so hard to make everything perfect or do things by a certain timeline, but just enjoy where I'm at, enjoy the ride, and see what comes my way. And yeah, I feel like I don't know if you guys are seeing that shift, but I feel like my content is changing a lot because of that too. I don't care to make it look pretty or aesthetic or do what everyone else is doing. I'm just sharing content that is exciting to me and inspires me and it is fun for me. And I'm really enjoying that right now. I feel like I'm stepping more into my feminine energy. And I have someone coming on the podcast to talk all about feminine versus masculine energy and how to date being someone who's feminine energy. I'm really looking forward to that. But before we do that, I think it's important to talk about dating mindset and how important it is to not be so rigid and so tough on yourself in dating. Dating is hard. It's supposed to not be easy. Like it's a numbers game and it takes a lot to find the right people in your life, friendships, relationships, work opportunities, all of that. And I love that Allie and I really got to discuss the differences because she's in her mid to late 30s and I'm in my mid to late 20s. So our perspectives are very different. And being able to go back and forth on that was a lot of fun. And I hope you get something out of this. So I'll do a quick suck and sweet of the week and then we'll dive right in to Allie Jackson. So my suck of the week is that I really need to slow the F down. I thought that this week would be chill and it hasn't been. And right now, next week appears to be relatively chill. And I'm really hoping that it does not book up. I feel guilty like blocking out days at my calendar because I'm not being accessible to potential clients or law students, but I really just need a day of no calls, absolutely no calls, but I'm just not there yet. Like I feel guilty. So I need to learn productive rest, working on that. I keep talking a lot about that on my content, but yeah, so I really just need to slow the F down and I'm booked and busy this weekend, but they're all wellness events. So I'm hoping that that kind of like helps a little bit of just doing a lot of wellness related stuff and just relaxing and spending time with friends because I've been making so many cool new friends here in Miami or meeting people through mutual friends and just having such an incredible time. So I really want to lean into that and just slow down, have more wine nights, girls nights, chill and spend time with friends at home. And yeah, that's kind of my second week is just I'm burnt out and I'm exhausted, but like in a good way. Like things are really good. I cannot complain, honestly, but I'm just tired and I would like my sleep schedule to get back on track. My sweet of the week is that my website is going to be absolutely incredible. I'm so excited. I'm so proud of myself for finally pulling the trigger on this. It's been something I've been wanting to do for like a year, but I just never felt ready and I had never found the right person and it was really expensive and I knew that, but the stars aligned at the end of March to finally pull the trigger and I interviewed a couple people and Brandika, like I said, I found her, Victoria, she's absolutely incredible and I'm just so excited for my website. So that's my biggest sweet of the week so far is seeing the brand guidelines and like the colors and everything come to life. I'm excited to see the site map. And I also got invited to another sunset boat cruise on Sunday. So I'm really, or not Sunday, Friday. So I'm really looking forward to that. Those are like my sweets of the week, like just a lot of cool shit happening. And I'm excited to see the fruition of it, the relationships I'm making, the things I'm investing in. I'm going to New York in June for work, the influencer marketing show conference, and I'm really looking forward to being back in the city. I just ordered some outfits for my branding shoot and for New York, and I'm looking forward to meeting potential clients, other attorneys in the space, creators, and seeing where it takes me. My businesses continue to grow. Yeah, I honestly cannot complain. Things are really, really good right now, and I'm excited to continue sharing it all with you, especially as I'm entering again my dating era and sharing these wins with the people in my life that I'm meeting and, you know, seeing where those connections take us. Cause that's all that dating is. It's just meeting people and being open to meeting people and connecting with people and working to build a life with them. So without further ado, I hope you enjoy this episode with Allie Jackson, Finding Mr. Height. Her podcast is so great. I love her takes, her commentary, and the fact that she has a lot of experience in the dating world and isn't afraid to share it. We talk all about how she got started doing so, and I think you guys are going to love it. So if you like this episode, please leave a rating and review. Please subscribe to the show, share with a friend, tag us as you're listening. Let me know who you want to see next, what topics you want me to cover next. And I will talk to you guys very, very soon. See you next week. Meet Allie. So, Allie, what's something that people wouldn't know about you just from following you?
Oh man. I think oh gosh, that's such a good question. I've never gotten asked that before. Um, Probably how sensitive I am. Like I think I come across as very like self-assured and like I like things don't bother me that much and that's the first thing that pops into my mind, but that I actually like get my feelings hurt really easily and cry all the time. And I think I try to let people into that a little bit more, but that usually surprises people.
Yeah. No, that's a good one.
That and I'm really messy.
Oh, no, that's a good one. And obviously, like the messy thing, people won't see because you don't share that like that much about like your home and all that for obvious reasons. But no, it's funny. I actually got asked all the time, like, how am I so confident? And I'm like, guys, I'm really not. You just don't see that side of me. I'm very similar to you, where I've always been that kid that I'm tough, like mean girl. Like I wasn't like a mean girl in a bully way, but I was just like genuinely like an angry kid. So I was mean, and it was like my cloak. It was my defense mechanism, like my confidence. Me thinking I'm being
Yeah.
confident, in reality now I know, like all my friends tell me like that I was really being mean. But in I would cry myself to sleep at night. Like people wouldn't know that part, that I was really sad and I was insecure, and like,
Mm-hmm.
it's and I think that's part of what drew me to sharing on the internet. And like I try to now show, like, I'm 26 and I'm figuring it all out. Like I don't have it all together, and I never want you to think that I do. I'm going to show the good parts, and then I'm going to tell you like a little bit about what's going on behind the scenes, so I don't have it all together. But I'm curious for you, like what was the catalyst for you starting a dating podcast or starting to share something so personal on social media? Because I know you share less now probably than you did at the beginning, but what made you want to start sharing it all on social media?
Totally. I think when I first started, it was on like my personal account that I've had, since college, like not a public account. And I just at first wanted a little bit of fun infused into my dating life. Like I was feeling like I was just burned out and annoyed and all these things, and I just wanted something fun. And I wanted to be able to that's why I started posting about that I was going on dates. And at first I was just doing it to my close friend story. And my close friend story was basically like at the time everybody but my
Yeah.
coworkers and my mom. Like it was like everyone. Um but I just was so it was private, and I just wanted to do something that made it more fun to go on dates and make it feel like less work and less of this thing that I was like slogging through because I wanted to meet
Yeah.
someone.
How old were you around this time? Because if you had close friends, like this was relatively recent.
Yeah, this was like 4 years ago, the beginning of 2020,
Got it. Got it.
pre-COVID. Like January 2020 is when I started doing this. And I was doing that for a little while. Obviously, then lockdown happened, and I also had a boyfriend during lockdown. So, like, I met someone through posting about all this stuff, and then came back to it later in 2020, started it up again, and realized that a lot of people, I think, were looking for some community in dating and looking to know that they weren't alone, that they weren't the only ones that were, going on all these first dates and being frustrated when they didn't get to a second date, or being annoyed when somebody ghosted them or slow faded them, or like whatever
Slow
fake phrase
fade.
that didn't
I've
exist
never
5 years ago
heard
you want to
that.
use. Yeah. So many new phrases these days. But people were frustrated and feeling alone, and there at the time wasn't that much representation of people going through that, and especially women in their 30s. I'm now 37, so at the time I was 33, 34. And I felt like it was important to kind of show people that you can be really happy in your life and living this awesome life and want long-term partnership, but that doesn't mean that you've failed or that you're, not doing what you're supposed to be doing, you can still have fun with dating and live a great life
Okay,
outside
I
of
want
it.
to ask though, because that mindset is huge, but that definitely takes a lot to get there. So, and I'm where you're at. I agree with you. I'm at the point where it's an addition to my life. I have an incredible, amazing life, and I love it. And
Mhm.
I am looking for someone at this point. I mean, I always said, I'm not going to settle, but now I truly know what that means to find someone who is an addition to my life
Right.
because I know what I want and I know what is going to add to that and what starts to feel draining. But it took me a while to get there. So when you started this account at 33, 4 years ago, was that your mindset at that point? Like to what you just said? Or, and to that point, like when you were in your 20s, how has your mindset evolved in that regard?
Oh man. I think it was my mindset 4 years ago when I started finding Mr. Height to an extent. It's gotten even more that way as I've built this community and talked to mostly women, other women about what they're going through and just realized how important it is to be doing what I'm doing and, be feeling like I want that addition to my life or something to like augment my life and not complete it or make my life. I definitely didn't feel that way in my 20s. Like when I was dating in my 20s, especially I'm thinking like 24 to 27 roughly, I really was like I don't want to use the word desperate. I hate calling women desperate, but like I really was desperate for that person and felt like if I just had that, everything would be fine.
Yeah. It's funny because that's where I'm currently at. And I would say, yeah, I agree. I don't love calling people desperate. And I personally don't think I've ever felt that way or I guess acted that way because I've asked my guy friends a lot. Like, I especially go to my guy friends for dating advice rather than girls. Like specific situations, I'll go to girls, but like big picture stuff, I'll go to my guy friends because obviously, like, that's who I'm trying to date. Like, I want to know how they're going to perceive something. And they're like, "No, you've
Very
never
fair.
really like you're not desperate. Like you're confident and you know what you want and you're not going to settle, but you also are craving that. So I get where you're coming from." And like that's something that I've realized, I always said around 23 is when I really kind of shifted my life trajectory to where I'm at now and my mindset really changed. And that's kind of what I've been building off of now. So it's been about 3.5 years. And I always said like 25 to 26 was going to be like when I figured out like career was going to start taking off and things are going to get good there. And then I can focus on like dating and relationships after. And then I met somebody at the end of last year. I was 25 and I was like, oh, maybe I can have both at the same time. And I got really, really excited about it. And I like went a little too crazy, like all in on it, like too early. And I think ultimately that was when I noticed I was desperate, but I was actually already in the relationship. But I was just so desperate. Like I finally got that person. I need to do all these things before like it goes away. Cause like I just didn't feel like it. I think subconsciously I didn't think it was right. So that's why I was trying to do that. So it's interesting that you didn't want to come
Yeah.
across as desperate and like you're where you're at now, like or where I'm at now, like 24 to 27, but you knew you were looking for it. So what was your approach to dating then versus what it is now? Because I'm currently navigating like, all right, I'm re-entering the dating world. How do I want to do things differently?
Yeah, I mean, I don't would not recommend my approach to dating from that time. I think because the thing that I wish that I knew at that time is that if I start dating somebody under I'll call it false pretenses of who I am, then I cannot blame them when they don't want to continue dating me once they find out who I am.
Ooh, that's a good.
And like that's not to say that like who I am is bad, right? But like I would pretend I didn't that something things didn't bother me that did or pretend to be like really interested in something that they were interested in that I wasn't. Or like
We've all been
like
there.
I was morphing myself. Yeah, of course. I was morphing myself into what I thought these people wanted. And then so then that would work for a little bit, right? Like I was his dream girl because I had made myself that way. And then we're dating for, typically what, 2 months ish or you can't keep that
Yeah.
up forever. And so like little by little the quote unquote real me who by the way is great but just isn't what he thought he was
Yeah.
dating the real me starts to come out, and he's like, oh, wait a minute, this isn't what I signed up for, which frankly is valid. And but to me at the time, I was like, these guys, like, fuck these guys. Like, when I really open up to them, they all leave. And I was really focused on that, and I couldn't see that I was a problem.
Yeah.
That, like, I was setting myself up for those outcomes. Now, granted, like, no one should ever treat you poorly, right? And some people did, and that's not cool of them. But I was setting myself up for these bad outcomes by not showing up authentically and turning people off by it.
Yeah.
Because if somebody is turned off by who I am, then I don't want to date that
Yeah.
person.
No, that's ultimately what was happening in my last relationship. And I didn't morph myself because I generally was interested in the things that he was interested in. So it wasn't a hardship, but I did catch myself, which is ultimately why I ended it. I realized I just wasn't being 100% myself. And something that a comment that he had made
Right.
in not so many words was essentially that the person I was now, like, I'm not the same girl he liked that he met at another point previously. And I was like,
Oh
I'm
boy.
still the same person, but you're getting to know more of me now because it's been a few months. And it's funny that you mentioned
Right.
the 2-month mark, because it was the version of me he liked was like month 1.5. And then we were now at like month
Yeah.
3 going on 4. So it's funny, like
And you're starting to,
that.
like,
Yeah,
get
like
into
we were
it.
in it and we were planning to build all these
Mhm.
things together and all life together. And I think ultimately we both just realized that the version of each other that we liked wasn't ultimately like our whole selves. And I wasn't willing
Yeah.
to, I would have had to water myself down to maintain the version of myself that he liked. And he wasn't willing to grow and evolve either. So it's like both of us were ultimately, we're just like, this just isn't, and he did not get that.
Yeah, you're not right for each other.
But it's crazy. Like we always hear like, the 3-month mark is like when you really start to get to know somebody, and like, and then again, when you're living with them, which I've never lived with a partner, so I can't talk about that part, but it's, funny. Like the 3-month, I had never really like believed that because I had never made it that far, I had never made it to the 3-month mark. And I was like, okay, fine,
Mhm.
whatever. Like, I don't know how much crazier can it be, but like, oh no, it's a big difference. But what do you think, like, what's your approach to dating now though? I'm curious. Like, I'm genuine, like, how can I do things better now? Because I'll tell you what mine was prior to this relationship, and it's interesting.
I think now I still try to see dating as fun. Like, I still try to see going on first dates as just an opportunity to
Yeah.
meet somebody, an opportunity to be curious about a new person, and not a potential to
Yeah.
meet my husband, which is what I thought about first dates 10 years ago. Like, I would go on a first date with so many expectations and so much pressure of, like, is this guy going to be my husband? And also, is he going to like me? And less about, am I going to even enjoy
Yeah.
him? I'm just going to get to know this new person and see if I want to talk to
Yeah.
him again. And that's it.
Yeah.
And shifting that mindset took so much pressure off of dating for me, where first dates are no longer
Yeah.
a big deal. Like, I could go on so many first dates and be fine because I'm not putting all this
Yeah.
pressure on them.
It's funny because I've never been the girl, and I hear that a lot. Like, I'm just so grateful that I was never that girl who was like, oh my God, does he like me? Like, is this my husband? I was never that girl. And I think it's because my parents have been together since they were kids, 15 and 17 respectively. And so my parents were always like, don't get in a relationship. Do not date. Like, they wanted us to, for all intents and purposes, play the field smartly. Like, they were like, don't settle. Like, I don't want you. They didn't want us to have relationships in high school. And I never did. I had one boyfriend, my first boyfriend ever, and that was it. Like, and my brother had, I think, 2 or 3 like more serious girlfriends, but ultimately, like, neither
Yeah.
of us were like, this is our person. We were like, mine for sure wasn't. And we all knew that like the girls that he was with were like, we'll be shocked if like it goes the distance, but we ultimately just don't, like, they don't want the same things long term. But in high school, that's okay. And it's funny because
Right.
both my brother and I were so good at, like, I guess dating in that sense that they're all still for the most part, we're still friends with our exes in the sense, like, if you see them at the grocery store, you say hi.
Oh, I love that.
Like, because it was
Yeah.
puppy love. Like, it wasn't really anything crazy. But so I was never the girl that was looking for my husband. And which as a Latina is very rare, because it's like, they're like, when are you going to settle down? When are you going to have babies? And it's like, my parents were never those parents, because they had done that and they didn't want that. Like, my mom always says, like, you know, I wish I would have had more. I love your dad, but like, I didn't get to have all of those opportunities. Like, I wish I would have. And she doesn't regret it now, but it's like the what ifs. So she always wanted us to have that. And for me, I used to treat dating like a networking opportunity because I love connecting with people. I love networking. And so to your point, like, I treated it as, I'm just going out to meet someone. And if I enjoy the conversation, I want to see them again, great. And if not, great. That's still true. And I'm keeping that part. But it was almost like I would go in being like, I'll keep them around if like I can get something out of them. Like, you know, if they're interesting enough, or like if they work, I can get cool connections, or I can like do something with this, like meet someone through that they know, or like their work, like, because I was at the point where I was really trying to figure out my career and like scale my business. So I'm like trying to look for work anywhere I can. And I'm glad that now, it's funny because it's like 2 years in, like both of them are shifting. It's like, I'm no longer that like desperate for work, because I have, you know, retainer clients and I have like a referral network. But I also am just kind of like, I really genuinely, I thought dating was fun. I've never thought it wasn't fun. It's not that I didn't enjoy it, but I just realized that that was a very intense approach. And I'm just going to go to do it just for fun. Like, it doesn't have to be anything serious. And now I started doing this, then I don't save numbers until the second date is planned. Just so like I don't get like that meant I'm like, oh, who's like, I mean, I eventually start picking up like area code is like that person. But I'm like, oh my God, he texted me. It's like, I don't know who that is. It could be a random like 888 number, and I have no idea who that is.
Yeah, I think the going into it, I think with no expectations is great. And the other thing that I stopped worrying about so much is scaring them off by things that I am into, or things that I want, or my answers to certain questions. So like, if you have deal breakers for you, like let's say that you like know you want kids. Let's say that you know you want to live abroad. Like something that's like an absolute deal breaker for you. I would be in the past really worried to bring that up, because I was scared that their answer wasn't going to align with my answer, and then they would end it. When in reality, their answer doesn't change just because I haven't asked the question.
That's a good one.
I'm just deluding myself. I don't, you know?
No, that's a good one. I'm very clear about like those kinds of things, like relatively upfront, not like necessarily first date, but I'll ask like certain questions, like, you know, when you're messaging before the apps, or like on the apps, or like right when you get their number, or like I love a FaceTime before a date, just to, you know, make sure it is who they say they are, and just, you know, get a feel for it. Like, I kind of treat it as like date 0.5. Like, I don't count it as a first date, but I like kind of like, I want to get to know you a little bit, so I can see if I can build off of that like in the future. I also need intellectual stimulation. So I'm like, if you're boring on the front end, like I'm probably not going to want to like go sit with you for 2 hours. So that's when I kind of bring it up. I'm like, I'll be like, so what are your like long-term goals? Or like, you know, most people aren't in Miami, you know, they're transplants. So I'm like, do you like it here? Like, would you want to live here? Like, you know, what areas do you like, you know, I'll like, if they say a certain area, I'm like, oh, my favorite, like the school that I like is there. Like, I would love to have my kids there. Like, I'll casually like drop it and see like their faces, or like what their thoughts are. And I don't necessarily be like, so do you want kids? But I make it very clear that I do. And like, if that's something that they don't want, then it kind of just fizzles out on its own. But I think that's huge that you stopped hiding who you were. Like, you know, if those are your deal breakers, there's nothing wrong with having them. So I think it's important to talk about, and I'm glad that more people are like you are talking about that. And I think it's so important to have dating podcasts and, like you said, a community for dating. I think the hardest part for me though with dating advice is that it's just everybody's is so personal. Like yours is going to come, you're an expert now, so that's a little bit different, but everybody's experiences play a role. Your childhood, society,
Well,
all
yeah,
of that.
it still comes from
Yeah.
my
So it's
lens.
like sometimes it's like hard. I'm like, I don't, you don't want to ask advice from people you don't want their lives, that kind of thing. It's like, if you know they're really struggling in dating, maybe don't ask that friend, but like it's important to have other people you can ask, which is nice.
Yeah, I mean, my advice is always centered in what's going to work for you. And I think so many times when people ask me questions, I turn it back on them. I think some people get annoyed because I always answer questions with like,
Yeah.
well, what do you think? So like somebody will ask, how often should I be texting in between dates with a guy? And my answer will be, well, how often do you want to text in between dates with a guy? Or like, who should follow up after a first date? Well, do you want to follow up?
Yeah.
Like those are the kind of framework shifts that
Yes.
I make when people ask questions for exactly the reason you said, because there is no one size fits all answer. It would be so much easier, and frankly, nobody would need to give dating advice if there were rules. Like if it was like, you should text 1.5 times a day in
One and
between
a
dates
half
1 and 2. And
times.
then in between dates 2 and 3, it should be an average of 3 times a
Yeah.
day. Like, if there were rules like that, it would
Well,
be so much
some
easier
people
and
would
we wouldn't
argue
need
that there are rules
advice.
like that. So what are your thoughts on
No.
certain types of rules and certain people who in this space who created rules? I'm really curious what your thoughts are.
I really never met a rule that I liked. Like, I think that there's not enough room for nuance.
Yes.
And I will say that depending on your pattern in your own life, it can be helpful to have rules for
Yes.
yourself. If you have a certain pattern, like let's say that you like some people have rules about like when to
Yeah.
have sex with someone, let's say, right? So like maybe people will say like whatever, 3 months, or I don't know, I made that up. But like some people have rules like that. If you have a pattern where you are consistently sleeping with people, getting attached to them, sleeping with them before you know if it's going to turn into a
Yeah.
relationship, getting attached to them because of that, and then being more upset because you've slept with them, it might make sense for you to
Yeah.
have that rule
I agree.
because you've experienced that pattern. So, like, I think personal rules can make sense based on your own tendencies, your own patterns, and what's going to make you feel good. But what I don't like is sort of blanket statement rules that are intended to apply to everyone, because I just think that's
I
impossible.
100% agree with you. And I've had to implement a similar rule to the one you used as an example. And, there's nothing wrong with setting rules for yourself, but I agree. It's those blanket ones that are
Yeah.
just, it makes it, to me, it takes the fun out of it. Cause then you're like thinking about like, oh, but I want to, but I can't. And like, should I? And then you're like, and then it's forced. And then it's just awkward. And like the other person can sense that. They can sense that it just isn't natural.
Yeah.
So, but I agree. Like, it's just, I love that you turn it back on the other person because it's like, what feels right to you? Like, it also depends on the person. Like, if you're talking to multiple people at the same time, like in those
Yep.
early stages, my cadence with texting one person is going to be way different than texting a different person. It depends on both of our schedules. It depends on both of our interests. It depends on what we're talking about. Like, perfect example, this weekend I went to the Formula One race. There was a couple people that I was talking to that were interested in Formula One. So I was texting them constantly, updates about like what's happening or where I'm at or sending pictures of the track. And then there was one guy, he was at the Kentucky Derby. So he's like, I'm with my family. I'm probably not going to text you much. And I was like, sounds good, dude. I
Yeah.
I took a shower and I got out of the shower and there was a text from him. And I hadn't heard from him in 2 days. And like, if another version of me would have been like, oh my God, he's not texting me back. And I was like, he said it up front. He's like, oh, I gladly will. In another conversation we had last week, I had mentioned something about how I'm always the one that initiates with my friends. So I would love for someone to initiate with me. I don't even know what we were talking about. And he was like, oh, noted. I'll initiate. Like, got it. But just letting you know, like, I probably won't text you much this week. But like, when I get back to Miami on Monday, like, let's do something. And I was like, all right, cool. Like, it's probably going to be a busy week for me, but like, we can fit something in. Thank you so much. The other person I've been texting all weekend. So it's like, it just depends. Like, it's so different for each individual couple, I guess, in that sense, like two people figuring it out.
Totally.
But no, I love that you turned the question back on it.
I mean, that's true with
Yes,
friends too, right?
100%.
Like, I often will think about this in the context of friendships where, like, we don't overthink our friendships in the way that
That's
we
so true.
overthink relationships. Like, I'm not worried that my girlfriend has not texted me. My girlfriend that I texted this morning asking if she wants to get dinner this week. I'm not worried that it's been 6 hours and she hasn't texted me back. Like, it didn't even occur to me to think about the fact that she hasn't texted me back. She will. She's
Yeah,
probably busy. However, if I had texted a guy at 9 a.m. asking if he wants to get dinner this week, and now it's almost 4 p.m. and he hasn't responded, I'm thinking differently
yeah,
about that for no
yeah.
reason.
That's so
I
true.
mean, for reasons, but like,
No, but it's true. Like, and that's to your point. Like, we should treat dating like we're building a friendship, because at least for me, the strongest foundation of a relationship is a friendship. Ultimately, like my brother and I had this conversation the other day, because I I used to joke that one of my girlfriends was like my boyfriend when my now ex-boyfriend was out of town, because we were long distance. So when he
uh,
wasn't with me or I wasn't around him, like she was my boyfriend, because we would always be out together. And my brother is like, but
yeah,
your boyfriend should be your best friend. I go, yes and no. Like,
no,
yes, they are one of my best friends. I would want them to be, because I'm with them all the time and I live with them and I'm building a life with them. But I want to have friends that are separate from that, because
totally.
on what happened was that I was my ex-boyfriend's best friend, and he wasn't mine, and he was putting all of his stuff on me, and I was like, I can't do this. Like, it's just too much. Like, I need you to have a life on your own. And so I think friendship is such a
Yeah.
strong foundation. So why do we treat it so differently? Do you have an answer to that? Or like, what are your thoughts?
I mean, I think there's just more emotions mixed in with dating than there is with friendship. And also, you can have so many friends, an infinite number, really. But if you're a monogamous person, you're
Yeah.
only dating one person. So I do think there is just inherently going to be more importance placed on that one person who occupies that one role
Yeah.
versus even if you have a best friend, you still have plenty of friends. And you can have plenty of friends. You can't have, if you're monogamous, you can't have plenty of
Yeah.
partners.
No, I think
So
that's such a
I
good
get it
point.
in that sense.
No, that makes a lot of sense, actually. Cause yeah, I always say, like, I have friends for different things. I go to certain friends first for
Mm-hmm.
certain, like, if it's career, I'm gonna go to a certain. If it's relationship, I'm gonna go
Yeah.
to a certain friend. If it's mental health, I'm gonna go to a different friend. I might tell all of them at some point, but I'm gonna tell them in different ways, or like at different times, for depending on. And I'm the queen of, I'll send a voice note to one friend and I'll copy and send it to somebody else, and I was like, slightly different
Oh yeah.
context, but this is what's
We all do
happening.
that.
But
I mean, you bring up a really good point that we have all these different, especially as women, we have all these different friends for different things, right? Like you said, you've got the friend that you go to for career advice, you've got the friend that you go to for dating advice, for whatever it is. However, we often expect our partner to be all things to us at once in a way that we don't expect our friends to be.
yeah,
And I think that that puts a lot of pressure on romantic relationships in a way that friendships don't have to sustain.
no, I 100% agree. I'm curious for you, like, how do you handle that decision of, like, what are some things, for example, like if you were in a relationship, you would tell your partner first versus your friends first? In that sense, like, I think for me, I like when I was in a relationship, I would talk to him more, and like he'd be the first person I'd go to if it was like a big moment or like a really hard
Mm.
moment. But like for inconsequential things, I would go to my friends first, and then I would tell them the big things later. But I'm curious, like, how you would handle, like, in that sense, like, having best friends and partner being different. Like, what do you tell your partner first?
I don't think I think about it in who I tell first because I think a lot of times that's circumstantial. Like if I happen to be
Yeah,
texting with a friend or talking to a friend and something happens. So I don't really think about it in terms of who I tell first. The way that I think about the level of support that I want from my friends versus my partner is more about, okay, I'm going to share this thing with them. What am I looking
yeah,
for from them though? So, like you mentioned, the friend that you go to for career advice. Maybe your partner is somebody that you really want to take career advice from and who gets it, what you're doing specifically, and who can offer you really solid advice in your field, and maybe
Yeah.
not. And like maybe they can be there for you emotionally if you're dealing with something at work, but maybe they're not going to have the practical advice that you are
That's a
looking
huge
for because
one.
they just don't get it. They're in some yeah, like maybe they're in, like I dated a guy who was a chef as an example. He could not relate to my corporate issues. Like he was there for me emotionally. He was like, that sucks. I'm sorry you're going through that. But like he didn't
Yeah.
have advice on like how to deal with the like shitty presentation I
Yeah.
had to give.
Oh,
Because he's like, he's doing something
yeah.
so
My
different.
ex was a fighter pilot in the Air Force. Literally could not tell you
So there you go. Exactly.
absolutely anything.
Exactly. So for that, I didn't expect that partner of mine to be able to support me in that way. Like, yes, I wanted him to be there for me
Yeah.
emotionally and like empathize, or sympathize probably is a better word. But I had friends that I could go to for that sort of
Yeah.
career advice and didn't expect to get that from him because it just isn't in his wheelhouse. And so if I had expected that, I would have been setting him up to
Yeah.
fail.
I think that last sentence, setting them up for fail, like that is, I feel like a lot of times we do that. We as women will set the guy up to fail and set ourselves up to fail when we're approaching dating, because not so much the not to mention the pressure of like, I want them to get married and I want kids and I want this to be my husband, that for sure. But it's just like you are comparing to every other past guy or your friend's boyfriends or the TV boyfriend that is like the hot
Right.
topic. And it's like every relationship is different and every iteration of each relationship is different. They're going to evolve and they're going to change the same way you do. And I think the key is finding someone that you want to grow with. And that was what I noticed. And like with the friends that I've had for multiple years and multiple iterations of myself is, you know, we all have grown and evolved and we're growing and evolving on parallel lines. Ultimately, with the partner, the goal has to be the same at the end, but it's okay to be parallel for a while and like expecting someone to be exactly where you're at and meet you where you're at every single point. Like that's not always fair. And that's something that I really had to work on because as an attorney, I at the beginning and I'm kind of reverting back to that now. I was only surrounded by other doctors, lawyers, engineers. And it's like, great, the intellectual stimulation's there, but the emotional availability is not. So then I was like, all right, I'm going to stop dating these like
Right.
professionals. I'm going to like go date like other people. And they're equally as great, also high earners, all these things. And it worked for a little while. And then I realized like there was just a part of me that like was missing that connection of someone who got where I'm at on a professional capacity. But my ex couldn't give me that because he didn't have those things. And so I think it's important to recognize like what are your deal breakers, but are also like what are you willing to give on a little bit to get a bigger reward at the end, like that emotional support or that life goal or whatever it is, whatever your goals are. I think it's also knowing what that definition is. Like success is personal. Everybody has an independent definition of it. Same thing with, do you want kids?
Yeah.
Where do you want to live? What kind of house do you want? Do you want a house? Do you want an apartment? Like those kinds of questions, like ultimately that changes, that informs the answer.
Totally agree.
What do you think has been the hardest part for you about dating and sharing your life on a dating podcast and like dating social media? And how has that evolved? Like how much you share?
I think the hardest part has been first of all, figuring
Yeah.
out what to share and where to draw the line. It's always been anonymous, like from the beginning. That hasn't changed in terms of like how I talk about the guys and like personal details and that kind of thing. But it has evolved how much I'm sharing in terms of not only the details of dates, etc., but also the details of my feelings on
Yeah.
them and the timing also. Like I used to do recaps pretty much immediately. Like I would go on a date and I would have a recap up that night where I like kind of filmed my thoughts about it and, that kind of thing. Over time, I realized that wasn't letting me sit with my own
Yes.
feelings for long enough before I was getting input from the world
Yeah.
on them.
That's a good
And so
distinction
that's
because I lost my inner
evolved.
monologue in my relationship because I wasn't journaling my thoughts. I was immediately telling him about it. And because of the distance and sometimes the time difference, I would talk to him on the phone every night. Like we wouldn't really talk throughout the day. We would talk at night for hours. And then I didn't really have time to process what was happening or what had happened in my day because I was processing it with somebody else. And that was a big thing for me that I realized was like, I've lost that inner monologue. So I think that's huge that you realize that. For me, it was definitely like, I don't, I want it to be anonymous. Like his face, his name, his career might not ever be shared. And a career might be depending on his, I couldn't share. You know, but knowing, like finding out what you're comfortable, what they're comfortable with you sharing. I used to do like if like I think I would talk about like if like a big thing happened on a date, I would mention like one time I had a bad date where like he didn't ask to split the bill. He just left the bill on the table for 20 minutes and the server kept walking around. I was like, all right, I'm throwing my card because clearly we're never getting up from here. And then he put his card down when I put my card and I was like, so I like asked about that. I was like, guys, like who pays on the first date? Like, and all my guy friends were like, murder, like absolutely not, get out, like do not do this. Murder. Like just I explained the situation. They were like, absolutely not. So like I'll talk about like dating things like that, but like it was months before I shared I even had a boyfriend, and months when I shared that I no longer had a boyfriend. And it wasn't like I'm single again. It was just like one day I just stopped mentioning that I was like a we or like a he or something. Like like knowing what to share is really really hard. How do they feel? Like when do you tell them, or do you tell them that you have this?
I always do. Well, not always. It depends on. So if I go on a first date, I don't tell them beforehand because I want it to be from my mouth in person, whatever. I've only been out with a couple people who already knew. If I know immediately, or like if I decide while on the first date that I don't want to see someone again, then I don't think it's relevant because like they're not going to be in my life even short term, let alone long term. They're going to be a blip on the radar of my content. I'll mention that I went on a first date for like 2 seconds. I don't think it's necessary.
Yeah.
So it tends to happen either towards the end of a first date or on a second date where I'll kind of like ease somebody into.
Do you let them follow your like public Instagram, or do they follow your private like personal account?
Funnily enough, before I had this account, I was not a big social media person. Like, I haven't posted on my personal account since October 2022 when I bought my condo. Like, I don't post very often, and I didn't used to post very often. And I also didn't ever have people that I was just casually dating or going on dates with following me. Like, you would only be following me if we were in a relationship.
Got it.
And vice versa.
Yeah, that's something I
that's
definitely
still how I feel about that account.
I agree with you on the personal. Like, only my ex didn't have social media, so he didn't follow it. But like that, like I would have only had them follow that if like we were official. But I always am like nervous. Like when the guy asks for my IG, I'm like, here's my number. Like because my public Instagram, it tells you everything I do. And you're getting my inner thoughts. Like you're seeing like my day-to-day life. You're seeing pieces of my home. Of course, obviously like very small pieces, but still like, there's like, I'm like, I don't know if I want just like the random person off a dating app until I meet them. And like, until I'm saving your phone number, I don't really want you to follow me because I've probably not told you what I do. The minute they hear attorney, half the guys are like, oh, I'm out on her. Because immediately like insecurities about money or like like just preconceived notions about attorneys will come up. And then or also I'm an influencer, so then it's like there's a whole nother set of things, and it's like, oh, you're both. And it's like it definitely like it raises a lot of questions. I'm like, I want you to get to know me before you get to know the public me. I always say I'm 100% who I am online, who I am offline. There's just more to me offline. But it's hard to kind of gauge like which part of me I want you to see first. And I'm like, I don't want them to know I have a podcast until like I'm really, really comfortable with them, because I'm talking about all these things that you don't need to know what's going on in my brain right now. Like it's too early.
Yeah. And I also think that the way, so you mentioned like what's one of the hardest things about doing this. And I think for me, one of the hardest things has been exactly what you said about I am who I am on my podcast, on my social media. Like I am me, but there's obviously more to me. And anytime I tell a story about something that happened or about how I'm feeling, even though I am being 100% authentic, I'm still not giving every single
Yeah.
detail. There's pieces of context missing on purpose, like stuff that's personal, but people fill in those
Yeah.
blanks. And so I think one of the hardest things for me has been people assuming that they know everything about me, or assuming that they know something that they don't actually
Yeah.
know. And that has been pretty hard, and it's worth it because I really like what I do and I think that it's making a difference and it's important, but that has been hard.
No, I 100% would agree with you on that. Speaking of loving what you do, what do you think has been the biggest lesson you have personally learned in your dating, and how have you made changes in your approach? We talked about like how the approach has changed, but like from things that you've learned from helping others, like what is the biggest thing you've learned about yourself?
I think I have gotten better at being direct because so much of my advice is about being direct. And I am a very direct person, and I've learned that I'm good at kind of synthesizing things and making things really simple and like easier to understand, but I've gotten better at that. Like that's a skill that I have not only did I have it, and it's one of the things I think that has, made this platform work, but it's something that I've gotten even better at as I've had it.
Yeah, I actually need to learn to be less direct, but um, but no, that makes sense. How do you kind of compartmentalize, or I don't know if that's the right word, but when you're talking so much about other people's issues and struggles, because dating is a lot of, it's personal and it's very emotional and very taxing on you. I kind of think of it as, in a way, you're a therapist. So how do you know when to like pull away and be like, no, I can't take that advice, wouldn't apply for me, but like that's the advice I'm going to give you. Like, how do you know when to not take the advice you're giving because you know it wouldn't apply to you?
Well, I think when I'm giving people advice, and I want to be super clear that it isn't therapy at all, but it's like similar
Yeah,
vulnerable space,
that's
right?
what I meant. Yeah,
I am, yeah, like I am never giving advice from the lens of here's what I would
yeah,
do. I'm giving advice from what's going to feel good for you, and what, based on what I know about you, which could vary depending on if it's a person that's asking in my DMs. I don't actually give advice in my DMs, but like if it's a person who's asking in a ask me anything on Instagram, I know very little about them. If it's a person who has me on a monthly retainer as a one-on-one client, I know a lot about them. So it's like I'm giving advice from the lens of the context I have about that person and what I think is going to make the most sense for them, not what I necessarily would do in that scenario. Because back to what we were saying about rules, I don't think there's a one size fits all answer for how to approach things. I do think there are some guiding principles like staying authentic to who you are, saying what you mean, meaning what you say, doing the things you say you're going to do, like those types of stuff. But I generally don't think about advice from a personal lens for that reason.
yeah. But how do you? Which totally makes sense. But how do you kind of? I guess you're good at keeping yourself out of it, which is good. But how do you know when to kind of leave work at work, and when it comes to your own life? I guess like when you're like facing a situation that maybe someone that you like coached earlier that week is facing, but you know that what you discussed with them probably wouldn't be the right approach for you. Like, how do you? Because that's in your head, it was fresh. So how do you kind of navigate that?
Yeah, I think I've just gotten really good at compartmentalizing, and maybe I always have been good at that. Apparently, it's in my chart. I like just had it. I do astrology readings every so often, and I just had one yesterday where the astrologer was talking about how I'm very good at separating myself from my emotions, which isn't always a good thing. No one
Yeah,
can do that. Um, but in this case, it is because I'm able to be there with someone in that moment and connect with them and feel what they're feeling, but then step away from it.
yeah.
And if I weren't able to do that, I don't think I'd be able to do what I do.
No, that totally makes sense. Yeah, I would love your astrologer's info because that's so interesting to me.
She's amazing.
I love all that stuff. Send it to me. But yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. You have to, as a lawyer, I have to compartmentalize a lot of things. You know, I'm getting a lot of info, and I
Of
can't.
course.
And that's something that I've had to work on with my parents, and like being in a relationship. I can't tell you everything that happened in my day. I can tell you like the highlights. My parents are like, you don't say names,
Yeah.
but like tell us what's going on. I'm like, I literally can't. They're like, we're not. I'm like, I know, but I
Literally
can't.
cannot.
And So it's hard to know like what I can and can't
Yeah.
say. But with all of this, you've been doing this for 4 years now. What do you think, if you could get rid of only one rule ever, like what would be the one rule that you would kick to the curb right away? And what do you think is like the best general piece of dating advice that we should all follow?
The one that I would get rid of is that it's either that the guy has to be the one to follow up. And this is like obviously coming from a heteronormative dating context, but most of the people who follow me are women. From the polls that I've done, the vast majority of them are women who date men. So that's who my advice goes out to typically. I would really try to get us out of the mindset of traditional gender roles in communication. Because once you're in a relationship, I hope that you are not thinking about it like, oh, well, my boyfriend needs to text me first every day. And so for that reason, I don't think it makes sense to frame early dating in the same way. Like, when do you make that shift?
Yeah.
Like, it just
That's
feels
such a great point
tricky.
about like when does it shift and like how would you approach it in actual relationships. Because of the time difference, my ex would wake up to like 20 texts from me and he would call it his daily news briefing.
Yeah.
Like, it's fine.
Oh, that's so funny.
I loved that, honestly. That was probably one of the highlights. But yeah, what do you think is like the best piece of general advice that we should all follow?
I think that is always flip it back on how do I feel about this? So not what should I do or why did they do this, but how does this make me feel? And I think always bringing it back to how something makes you feel rather than what you think you should do, quote unquote, or trying to understand somebody else's motivation. Like, I would say 50% of the questions that I get in my DMs or in my Ask Me Anything start with, why does someone do this? Like, why would he do this? Why would they say this? Why do they do this? I don't know, first of all.
Yeah.
I can't tell you why someone did something.
Yeah.
I also don't think it's worth our time to
No.
try to figure out why someone has done something instead of focusing on how that thing made you feel.
That's a great, I love that you turn the questions back around, but that's a good one. It's not about the intention. It's how it made you feel. And you have to also, to your point of turning it back around, we also have to recognize that whether our intentions were good or not, it might have not landed that way. And that is going to change the way that the relationship or friendship or whatever it is will, evolve from there. But this has been absolutely incredible. I wish we had more time because there's so much I want to talk about. And like, I'll leave this with the tidbit. Maybe we'll do a part 2. But one thing I've been noticing a lot in my shift as well is I want to work on being more in my feminine energy because I had to be so masculine to grow my law firm and to go to law school. And I've just been very much in my masculine for so long that I'm kind of starting to realize like it's okay. I actually have more power when I'm more in my feminine energy around men that I would like to date, not like my guy friends. And that's been the newest shift in like the dating for me for the last month. And it's been working. So I'm intrigued by that. And I would love to discuss that more with someone. I think it would be cool. But thank you so much, Allie, for coming on the podcast. Where can everybody find you and chat with you or book you for consultation?
Yeah, thank you for having me. I am at Finding Mr. Height on Instagram and TikTok. And if you're interested in coaching, you can find all that info at findingmrheight.com.
Can you leave us with how you came up with the name? I love it.
I'm 6 feet tall. And so when I first started doing this, it wasn't like, if I knew it was going to be a business, I probably would have called it something else.
No, I love it.
At the
Don't
time,
change
it was just like a funny way of referring to my own height. I don't plan on changing it, but like if I knew, hindsight being 2020, like I'm 6 feet tall. I tend to date guys that are my height or taller. So it was like a pun when I first started.
I love it so much. So no, it's genius. I think it makes so much sense. And fingers crossed that one day we will both find our Mr. Right and Mr. Height. But for now, thank you guys so much for listening, and I will talk to you next week.